And welcome. Thank you for joining me and my guest speakers to talk about Cleveland Bridge. As you may know, the bridge is a Grade 2 listed structure and the council has a legal duty to protect it. It was strengthened in 1997 and engineers signed it off for vehicles of 18 tons. The council tried to impose an 18-ton weight limit in 2012, but the government insisted the bridge has to carry 40-ton vehicles and threatened legal action unless the bridge was kept open for vehicles of up to 40 tons. Now, last year, you will also probably all know this, I raised this matter in Parliament. I've had a number of meetings about this, but so far, we haven't really made any progress. So the discussions are ongoing, and I am very pleased that I can welcome you into the discussions tonight as well. 20 years later, after the last repairs, the bridge was found to be in poor repair again, and again needed to have very urgent repairs. Work was supposed to start at the beginning of this month, but didn't. So tonight we are hearing what is happening. Joining me to talk about Cleveland Bridge are councillors Manda Rigby and Richard Samuels, who represent the wards on either side of the bridge, the council's chief operating officer Mandy Bishop, and the council's traffic manager Paul Garrett. And from 6:30 onwards, our council leader, Councillor Kevin Guy. I will introduce each of our speakers and give them the floor. Our council officers have an information presentation to give, and we will take factual questions on the presentation immediately afterwards. I will then move on to our other guests, and finally there will be an open Q&A session at the end. So please, as Matt has already said, submit your questions using the chat functions. So let's start. We begin with Councillor Rigby, because Manda, you are the cabinet member for transport as well as a ward councillor for Bathwick. First of all, Manda, can I ask you, when will the work start?
Thank you, Vera, and thank you everybody for turning up this evening. I think it's fair to say the work has started because we've already started putting up all the scaffolding, which is preliminary work that has to be done before anything else can be done. And as people who've tried to get over the bridge will know, we're currently working on a traffic light system to keep the flow going one way. What we have announced in the past is that there's going to be a full closure of the bridge. And I think if there's one key message I can get over in terms of the practicalities of what we're doing now, it is for the latest information, please do keep checking the website. If you go on the Baines website, there's a link there to Cleveland Bridge, because that's where we'll keep it updated. And part of the reason for saying that is if you'd asked me this question a couple of days ago, Vera, I would have said that the full closure will be happening at 1 minute past midnight on June the 28th. That is looking now increasingly unlikely. And the reason being, we're not through this pandemic yet. And one of the workers has tested positive for COVID and was in contact with quite a lot of the other workers on the bridge. So absolutely, in terms of health and safety, both for those people there and for people coming into contact with them, we have to work with the contractors to see how many people are going to need to self-isolate and what impact that will have on our plans to close the bridge on the 28th of June. So that is why it's so important to keep looking at the website. And I'd say that would continue throughout this project. Because although we did a really good job of planning for what we thought was going to be able to happen, we always made it clear that until the scaffolding was up, we couldn't really have a terribly close look at some of the areas that we think might need some repair. So it's a bit like, I'm sorry, it's a horrid analogy, but it's a bit like if you get builders and work in your own home, occasionally something can come up that was unexpected. And we're sort of assuming that a Grade 2 listed structure may throw up some unexpected things. So I really wish I could give you a completely definitive answer of we're going to close on X date, it's going to take X number of weeks, and then we're going to take the scaffolding down for another 6 weeks, and that will be it. That is absolutely what we were planning for and what we're aiming for. but please do bear with us, because what we have to do is make sure we do this as safely as we can and as effectively and efficiently as we can. The other thing I'd like you all to be aware, again, we're just talking about the practicalities of during the bridge closure, and I'm sure that you'll see later that we've got some diversions guidelines agreed. It is that a bit like water, traffic will sometimes find a way that you don't necessarily expect it to. So as a team, we've all accepted that it may be possible that when the bridge is closed completely, that there will be some activity by some drivers that we haven't yet modelled for. So can I assure you that we should be keeping such a close eye on what actually happens at this stage? And if there are times we feel we need to do some different mitigations, we'll put those in place. So sorry, Vera, that was a long answer to what was a short question, but I hope it sets the scene for you.
Well, thank you, Amanda. And absolutely, COVID has made many plans, private or public plans, so very difficult. So I think this is well understood. It's unfortunate, it's very frustrating for anybody who's running the project as well, and of course for those affected by the bridge closures. But thank you, Amanda, for giving us that update. That was very important. And as you say, there will be unexpected things probably happening, but the council will make sure that the latest information is always on the website. So that is really the best information that we can give everybody tonight. And please share that as well, because it is important that we try and keep disruption as much to a minimum as we can. Of course, there will be disruption, that's well understood. So the work will be going ahead later this month. Can I now introduce Manda Bishop, Chief Operating Officer at the Council, and Paul Garrett. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us and giving up your time. I'm looking forward to your presentation, so we'll have a few slides from you. And for our audience, a reminder that you can submit questions to the officers in the chat to the host. So if you've got some technical questions, please put that in the chat. And Matt will read out your questions, and Mandy and Paul will try to answer all the technical questions that you have as far as possible. So thank you again to both of you. You're very welcome, and over to you.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you, Vera. I think you're going to just put up a few slides onto the screen, aren't you, or one of your colleagues is. Thank you very much. If we go on to the next one. I'm really pleased that you've heard already about directing you to our website, because if you do go on the website, I know many of you did attend, but there was a quite comprehensive webinar that was held in March of this year, and I would really encourage people to follow the link through the Cleveland Bridge pages to get more detail on the works that are going on. That was provided by one of our most senior engineers, and there's a lot of information in that webinar, so I encourage people to have a look at that. And as Vera and Amanda have said, the bridge was constructed, as we know, around 200 years ago and reinforced in 1928 with the concrete. The critical aspect with regard to the works that are required is that the concrete itself has been in a position that we have, unfortunately, the water has got into the structure, which has meant that the concrete has degraded and that we've actually, it's impacted on the ironwork. And if you could go on to the next page, that would be great. And that shows you the sort of damage that we found underneath the bridge. So the works really are in several elements. There are three elements. Firstly, to actually repair the damaged concrete and the exposed metal that has been exposed as part of that. There will be a waterproof coating that is put on top of it, and then we will refurbish other elements as well as the deck, the parapets, to include those two elements as well, and it will conserve the structure for some time to come. Thank you very much. I'm going to go.
Sorry,
yeah, I was just going to say, like I said, if you, my strong advice is to actually go to the council's website. The details of the works programme are contained on there, as well as a lot of information for residents but also for those that are hauliers and a whole range of other individuals such as businesses. And there's some really good, strong advice on there as well about making alternative options as we develop the bridge works as they move forward. I'm going to hand you over now to my colleague Paul, who's going to talk to you about the diversion routes, both the ones for heavy goods vehicles and those people operating in and around Bath. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Mandy. So a lot of you who've been in Bath recently will have noticed that we've had temporary traffic lights up at times, and that's to enable the scaffolding to go up. And it's actually quite a complicated scaffolding process to go through, which is why it's taken a number of weeks. But once the scaffolding is up, we actually need to close the bridge to carry out the work itself. It's not possible to undertake these extensive repairs and keep traffic flowing on the bridge at the same time. So we do have two diversions, and this one that's on the screen now is a diversion largely for heavy goods vehicles, and that's because the alternative routes through Bath do have a 7.5 ton limit. So the purple line shows that diversion route for HGVs, which does take traffic out of Bath on the A4 to Hicksgate roundabout. And then there's on the Avon Ring Road, the A4174, up to junction 1 of the M32 and then onto the M4. So that will take the lorries that are using Cleveland Bridge as a through route at the moment on the wider diversion route, and keep them out of the city centre as far as possible. If you could move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so this plan here, if you can see that, it's a little bit blurry actually, apologies for that, but that's showing the centre of Bath. And what we have here is the diversion route for light traffic. So this will be for traffic that's under 7.5 tonnes. And what it does, it diverts traffic away from Cleveland Bridge along the A36. So that's Pulteney Road, Rossiter Road, Lower Bristol Road, over Windsor Bridge, and then on the A4, Upper Bristol Road, Queen Square, George Street and the Paragon. So these routes will get quite congested. There's no denying that we'll have a lot more extra traffic on those roads. But the diversion route will be well signed. Just to point out a couple of what those symbols mean on the map there's a couple of triangles and they denote the bus gates in the city centre, which operate from 10 till 6. And then the square one is the bus gate on Pulteney Bridge, which operates at all times. So we have done some planning to try and mitigate for some of the impacts of the additional traffic going through other routes in Bath. One area that's possibly going to get some additional pressure will be the toll bridge in Bath Eastern. We've already got some temporary traffic signals up there to put in temporary crossings because there's been some additional traffic already going up there whilst we've had the lights up on Cleveland Bridge. Once the bridge closes, we'll be looking at putting some extra temporary parking restrictions on the approaches to the toll bridge, just to keep that route clear. Also off of London Road, some signing to warn drivers not to use Camden Road to go through Walcott as a diversion to avoid traffic. We have undertaken some traffic modelling to look at what the impact of closing the bridge might be, where will traffic go, and it's actually predicting that traffic flows on London Road will reduce after the first few days. I think as people get used to the change, it'll take a few days to adjust. But what the modelling is actually showing is that drivers will make their choices further outside of Bath to try and avoid Cleveland Bridge. But there will be some pressure points, undeniably, and quite likely to be on Charles Street, Green Park Road, where we will see quite a lot of additional traffic, and on North Road as well. We will need to put some temporary loading restrictions on the A4, Gay Street and George Street. We won't ban loading at all times because, of course, businesses do have to operate, but we will just need to restrict loading a little bit more than takes place at the moment, just to help the traffic flow through the city centre. And we do also have some backup plans just in case if the congestion in Bath is pretty severe. But we do have lots of traffic cameras around the city centre. We will be operating our control room, whilst the closure's in place for the first few weeks, so we can really keep a detailed eye on traffic. And that will also include keeping an eye on traffic flows, doing traffic counts, to keep an eye on what's going on. And we've certainly got close liaison with the police, fire and ambulance to make sure that they're not too adversely affected by the traffic. So that's all I had to run through. So I believe it's over to questions.
Thank you both. That was a very clear and quick run through to what is going to happen. We have heard from Manda already when to expect the closures with all the caveats that Manda has mentioned. So Matt, have you had any questions yet?
Yes. First question is, can we register as stakeholders and get prompts when changes happen? Is that possible? Is anyone pushing out messages, or is it simply going onto the website?
No, we are being proactive. There's a whole range of ways that we're engaging with people through newsletters, Twitter, social media, etc. As well as we've got a dedicated email address as well, cleveland_bridge@bathnest.gov.uk. So there's a whole range of ways that we're engaging with people, including sort of national organisations, haulage, working with obviously neighbouring councils, a whole range of groups as well, and business communities. So we do have a newsletter, I think, that we're regularly sending out as well, Paul. I mean, we've got a communication list, and I don't know whether you've got any more information on that one.
Yeah, we currently have a list of main stakeholders we're trying to keep updated. But and anything significant would be reported through the weekly news email that goes out, which people can go onto the website and subscribe to. But as we've mentioned a few times, the best thing to do is just keep checking on the website itself for updates.
Paul, can I just repeat that, because I thought I really struggled to hear that. I don't know whether that is just my machine or whether it comes from your end. Can you just say that again? I couldn't hear that very clearly.
Yeah, apologies. The council's got an email you can subscribe to if you go into our website, and you can actually get our weekly e-newsletter. So any significant changes would be reported by that. But people, what we strongly encourage people to do is just keep an eye on the website to look for updates.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Jeremy, I hope that was okay. There's some questions from Roy. Why was the planning application restricted to listed buildings, not full planning application? That's because I believe the conservation officers were content that the works were repairs. Why were they considered to be urgent? I don't know if Mandy or Paul, but
yes, I can answer that, Matt, if you would like. I mean, we obviously regularly inspect the bridge. We've got a duty to maintain all structures, of which this is obviously one of them. And we have found in recent years that the bridge has deteriorated quickly, and our engineers have had regular engineering reports, and each one of those has shown that it's deteriorating further and further, and we've now got to the stage where, as I said, we cannot leave it any longer. It's as simple as that. It's the structure itself, and it's between inspections, it's deteriorated even faster than we envisaged at that time. That's what I'm advised by the engineers working for the council.
Yeah, I think
Can I add something to that? As a member of Parliament for Bath, I'm like all Bathonians and people who live around our beautiful city, I am so proud of our heritage. But of course, with it comes a duty, and anybody who owns anything, I mean, the council doesn't own the bridge, but has a responsibility to look after it. You know, you have to take that responsibility very seriously. And therefore, you know, and the government has given money to the council actually for the repairs. The government wouldn't have given the council money if it wasn't necessary. So the scrutiny over that the repairs are very urgent and necessary has definitely happened. And you know, that we all know that the government is notoriously short of money. They wouldn't have given the council the money if this wasn't necessary. It is absolutely necessary. And for all of us, you know, to keep our beautiful, beautiful heritage and preserve it for future generations. I think most people in the city will understand that that is our duty, and that is also our wish. It's certainly my wish.
And the water to the concrete, the water is soaked into the concrete elements for many years. And so the reinforcements, you know, that you saw on the screen have started to rust. And so, you know, it is quite significant structural issues. And
it's in nobody's interest that the bridge falls into the river, in nobody's interest. So we want to keep it open and we want to preserve it for future generations.
Okay, an important question here from Andrew. How will the closure impact on the emergency services which are sited just next to the bridge?
Yes, well, we've got the emergency services literally, haven't we, next to the bridge in this case. The access for blue light services will be maintained at all time, as well as for pedestrians and cyclists as well. So we've worked, as you can imagine, with the council officers, and the council itself has got very close contacts with emergency services. So we've liaised with them throughout this process. And whilst I'm not saying it won't be challenging to manage that, we will make sure that blue light services are catered for as part of this process.
Okay, thank you. Another one from Roy. What steps have been taken to negotiate with Wiltshire County Council and Wiltshire's MPs to remove the primary route and strategic route designation from the A36 as it passes through Bath? I think the Minister has expressed a view on how that should happen, haven't they, Vera, in your discussions with the Minister?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is a strategic route, and this is the problem, and we will come to the difficulties about the route itself later on in the discussion. We have got a strategic route going over this bridge, which is a historic bridge, a heritage asset that we need to protect, and it is ultimately not a very suitable route, but it is one of the north-south routes, and the Minister itself is keen, and there are studies around what is actually a suitable north-south road. We can discuss that. The government itself hasn't come to a conclusion yet, but there's consultation going out, and Manda will probably be able to, Manda Rigby will be able to also contribute to that. But ultimately, you know, when such an urgent repair has to happen, then of course, you know, the bridge has to close and the route has to close. As I said before, if the bridge is going to fall into the river, it would be worse. So we have to have a duty and a wish to keep the bridge open and repaired and passable. And of course, ministers or other MPs around Bath have well understood that. And so has the government. So, you know, in terms of bridge closure now for the repairs, it's absolutely was not a controversial issue at all.
Got a question from Keris. If you don't mind, I'll just abbreviate this slightly. What mitigation is being put in place for the south of the river, where all this HGV traffic will now go along the A36, the Lower Bristol Road? Is there anything else? What are we doing? Anything to sort of ease that traffic and keep it moving?
There isn't an awful lot you can do to ease it. We're certainly trying to keep the road clear of any planned roadworks. So other than any emergency works that need doing, we won't permit any roadworks along the diversion route, as I'm sure people would expect of us. But yeah, there isn't a lot you can do to make the traffic flow better. It's, you know, we always want traffic to flow better at any time. So the main thing we want to do is traffic to use the proper diversion routes and not take the alternative routes, because that's when it's likely to cause congestion in other areas.
And Keris points out that there are, according to DFT data from 2019, there's 1,000 HGVs per day. So I'm sure you've noted that. Important question from Rachel. Will you be able to stop all other utility works which would result in roadworks while this is going on? And will you delay them whilst the bridge is closed?
Yeah, on Main Road through Bath, we will delay utility works. Again, we can't, we don't have any ability to stop utility works that are emergencies. And what they refer to as customer connections are treated as emergencies. But on the whole, any other planned works by utility works on main roads and baths will be deferred until the bridge reopens.
And I think a question from Jeremy again. You mentioned that you'd be keeping an eye on. I think Manda mentioned you'd be keeping an eye on where the traffic goes. Do you have cameras, observation cameras? And this specific question is: do you have one on Camden Road?
At Camden Road specifically, we can get some data from ANPR cameras that we've got around, but we have taken some traffic flow surveys recently, and we'll be able to get other ones once the closure's in place. So we'll certainly be able to know how traffic is changing, and wherever we've got traffic signals, we know what the traffic flows are.
Okay, Penelope's asking, do you anticipate some impact on St John's Road, Grove Street, and the use of Pulteney Bridge by traffic ignoring diversions?
I don't think we'll have a problem with Pulteney Bridge because it's enforced by cameras anyway at the moment. So, you know, I think people will soon realise once they get a fine if they've been trying to use Pulteney Bridge, which they shouldn't be doing. And so because of that, I don't believe St John's Road will suffer there. There'll actually be so much less traffic on Bathwick Street that there just won't be any advantage to using St John's Road.
Okay, I've got quite a long question here from Johnny. With the exception of the toll bridge, the B3108 will effectively become the last crossing on the Avon prior to Bath. We've already seen a marked increase in HGV traffic on this route because of the CAS, which is resulting in some damage. Concerns from the residents of Limpley Stoke that this will worsen as the proposed HGV diversion is unrealistic for 3646 traffic looking to head east on the M4. What responsibility will Baines take for the impact on the B3108, and will they work with Wiltshire Council to secure mitigation?
There's a weight limit Bradford on Avon anyway, but I mean, we're positively signing traffic to the west of Bath, so we'll be doing what we can to make sure traffic follows that route.
Okay, there's a question from Philip. You said the bridge repairs would secure the future, the bridge for the future. Is it fair to say that when the weight restrictions are lifted, the bridge will be safe to reopen fully?
Well, we always take action that is safe. So yes, the bridge will be, the works are being undertaken to ensure we maintain the safety of the bridge as we move forward. So safety is at the forefront of these works. You know, it's you can see from the pictures that the weather and the rain, etc., has impacted upon the integrity of the structure. So the whole purpose of the government grant is to make sure that we maintain that safety moving forward.
I mean, the question, of course, is, and I know that this is going to come up later as well. Is it safe for all traffic? And this is, of course, a very big question. You know, is it ultimately safe for all traffic, including the very heavy goods vehicles? And this is a big judgment call. You know, it might be safe for a number of years, and then the bridge will start deteriorating again. And I think that is, of course, our big problem and the question around the whole idea about a weight restriction. But we are coming to that. I think we're going to come to that discussion later in the evening of what is actually a safe route for many years to come, rather than just for a relatively short period until the bridge then needs repairs again. And I think only probably structural engineers could make some judgment. But when the structural engineers made their recommendation in 1997, they clearly thought it would only be safe for vehicles up to 18 tons. That's how I understand it. But of course, you know, I'm not a technical engineer, and I think we would have to sort of leave to answer that question, maybe for a technical engineer.
Okay, I've got a question from Michelle Donnellan, who's the MP for Chippenham. So this probably for you, Vera. My concern is not that you are trying to preserve a bridge, which of course not, but the lack of collaborative work with Wilts Council and Wilts MPs. We too also want to preserve our historic buildings, bridges, and manage air pollution and traffic. This will push a great deal more traffic into Wiltshire, so it's deeply disappointing that there has been a reluctance to work together. Also, can you detail the proposal regarding banning HGVs and the impact on the surrounding area? Is the idea to be in the long term?
Yeah, Michelle, I have written to you and invited you to a meeting, and I'm waiting to hear from you to agree to a meeting where we can discuss these issues further. So I absolutely believe that we need to work together. I absolutely know that we all want to do the best for our residents, and that we can't just sit here. We can't just sit here and say what is best for me alone. We need to cooperate. I've always been an MP to believe in local, national, international cooperation. So let's do the local cooperation, work together. And if you are coming, you and your colleagues from Wiltshire coming to the meeting that I have proposed, let's really go for it and go through the details, make sure that we have the representatives from the council there as well. I'm totally and utterly open for discussion on that. I do, however, believe that the responsibility for our beautiful heritage structures is not just a responsibility for us in Bath, but for the whole, at least of the surrounding areas. And clearly the strategic route through Bath is not particularly the best route, and you know that. And therefore, indeed, the Department for Transport has put out a consultation or a study where the best route is going to be looked at and discussed. And indeed, the Department for Transport, as I understand it, has already put out what they believe is probably the best route, and it is not Cleveland Bridge, as I understand it. But these are discussions that we have to have together, and I'm the first person who is happy to have several meetings if necessary. But let's start with the first one. I've sent out the invitation. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, I think maybe we can come back to some of those issues after we've said farewell to the officers. So Brian's got a question. Do you have any idea of the additional traffic travelling through Box? Has that been modelled?
We do some modelling out as far as Box. It didn't show any significant increase in traffic. The main, as you probably expect, the main increase in traffic is in the city centre, and the further you get out, it's just not particularly significant numbers. So no, Box did not feature as an area that's going to see a lot of extra traffic.
Question from Jeremy, big picture. What chance of getting the A350 finally dualled and trunked? And I think that goes back to what Vera's just said. The government's preferred discussion route is the Western Gateway Transport Board and having the conversations through that mechanism on those matters. Johnny Kidney has come back. Thinks the weight limit on at Bradford-on-Avon is irrelevant because HGVs will ignore it. Keris has come back with what will you be doing to prevent the impact of all the extra air pollution in those sensitive communities, specifically she mentions Widcombe. HGVs, and I've got a question from Anna. Paul mentioned there was a backup plan if congestion becomes too much. What will that involve, and how will you determine too much? Is complete gridlock possible?
One of the things I was going to say is that we are tweaking things as they go, as is fair to say, following feedback. And I think we've encouraged people to feedback via the various routes. And only in the last 24 hours, we've had in some areas, we've had some particular local information that's come through, which is really, we're grateful to receive, and we've adjusted it. So, we would encourage people to feedback before Paul goes on to some of the other questions, because we are amending the arrangements and and certainly the traffic management arrangements as we go. And I know that Paul will talk to you about the other elements now. So I would encourage people, and certainly the ward councillors across Bath and North East Somerset have been excellent about getting back to us with views and thoughts and early information as well if things aren't quite going to plan. So for example, today we've resequenced some traffic lights, we're putting in place some parking restrictions in a place as well. So I'll hand over to Paul for a couple of the other elements that the question raised as well. But I just wanted to raise that, that those amendments are ongoing.
Yeah, well, we do. I mean, you probably know we've got a lot of traffic lights in the centre of Bath. And we, like many cities, we've got something called an urban traffic control system. So that can automatically, to some extent, adjust the signal timings according to the flows of traffic on different roads. And we can intervene as well. We can manually intervene, and certainly that's what we're going to be keeping an eye on the first few days of the closure, when people are just getting used to it. We can manually intervene remotely for those traffic lights and give certain arms of a junction more green time than others if we need to clear things. I mean, in terms of the backup plan, what we're looking at is Charles Street, Chapel Row, plans we could put in place if we need to restrict traffic down there. If it starts clogging up past the bus station as well, because of course we've got like a one-way system around the bus station there. So if that gets clogged up, then of course it starts to affect a lot of buses. So potentially, if we need to, we could put something in place there to help the buses if traffic gets particularly congested.
Thank you. Follow-up question from Jeremy. What has been done to encourage hauliers to use other routes not involving Bath? Have you gone out proactively to, like we did with the clean air zone, have you gone out to businesses to warn them that the bridge will be closed? Yeah,
we've got quite an extensive list of hauliers and lots of other businesses who have been keeping up to date. The Road Haulage Association, the Freight Transport Association, we're keeping them updated. Since this project started, really. So they've been engaged for quite a while.
Good. Rachel's pointed out something really important. School run traffic produces a lot of peak traffic. What have you been doing to work with schools? And now that school catchment areas are just anywhere, we've got a lot of school buses going across the bridge. How are you going to get the kids who need to cross the river to their schools?
Well, I mean, there is a limit to what we can do, isn't there? We're trying to publicise the closure as much as possible, so people can be prepared. And it's unfortunate. It is going to cause some disruption. It's unavoidable, and people are probably going to have to make some adjustments, maybe to their morning and afternoon routine. There really is a limit to what we can do. So it's making people aware. And getting the message out there is very much a big part of it.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's probably it for officers. In which case, I'll let you get back. Can I say to all the people who just had slight follow-ups and questions on their questions, if you could email that address, email address I put up, then officers can respond specifically to your questions. Okay.
Matt, I just actually, I've got a very quick question that might be useful, and that is, the wait list restrictions have already been on the bridge for many months now, and actually, the best thing we can do is actually get modelling from Wiltshire Council of the impact in the surrounding areas, and I would be really interested to hear that. So if we're talking about what impacts there are, we have already actually had the weight limit on the bridge, as I can't remember from when onwards, and what is the feedback actually from Wiltshire Council and the surrounding areas of the extra impact through the villages already. So I think that would be quite useful, because then we have real data.
Okay, and it's just a little question, a little point from Michelle, who gets, as the MP, she'll get a little extra word to say that she's not sure that she's received an invite, but very happy to get together and meet. So we'll follow that up. So I'll just say thank you very much to the officers, and I'll hand back to you, Vera.
Can I just say, Matt, I sent the invitation some time ago. We sent an invitation last week again, but I'm happy to send the letter out again. And let's keep in touch over this. But I definitely send it. I remember well signing the letters, and I'm sure my office had sent them out.
Okay, I'm just handing back to you to say farewell to the officers.
Well, thank you very much, Mandy and Paul. I think that was very useful to have that conversation with you. And it is a work in progress. It's nobody would want the bridge to be in the state of repair that it is. It needed to be repaired. It is in nobody's interest not to repair it. And the council has got a duty to do so. And thank you for all the work you're doing. Thank you for being so open to discuss the issues. And I'm sure the discussion is going to be ongoing. So thank you very much for your time again. And if you were in a room, we would all give you a clap for your time this evening. So thank you very much again, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So that means we now have the discussion with the councillors from Bath and North East Somerset. Moving on to Councillor Richard Samuel, who's our to ask him, what is your expectation on the level of disruption in your ward in Walcott, and what are your concerns?
Thank you, Vera, and good evening, everyone. Well, I have 6 specific concerns, and some of them have been covered already earlier on, but I'll run through them anyway. The first relates to the extra traffic that will go along London Street and the Paragon. Residents there are concerned about that, and clearly that is on the diversion route, so that is not an unreasonable concern. I think there will also be some additional potential traffic on Walcott Street. We don't know exactly whether that will have any impact on the businesses, but it's something that is of concern to the businesses. I think it is possible that initially the bus timetable may get disrupted as the traffic movements adjust to the new reality for the next 6 months or so. But I expect that to settle down. So that's bus services from the east. The concerns about diversion through Larkhall and Camden have been raised and discussed earlier. I share those concerns. And for those who don't know, what we are concerned about is that people will choose either to go up the A46 and then cut across through Larkhall, through Camden to Lansdowne. The modelling shows that that may not necessarily be the case. And the other issue linked to that would be motorists choosing to drive off London Road and go up through the routes up to Camden Road and then along the same way to the west. Again, there is signage up now to discourage that, but it's one of those things I think where we'll have to watch and see. I am expecting, once the bridge is fully closed, that there will be an initial period of disruption, because people will need to get used to the new road layouts and the way that you go in and out of Bath. But again, I don't expect that to last a long time. And then finally, I am concerned about the impact of the building scheme on the businesses in Cleveland Place and around Cleveland Place. It won't have escaped anybody's notice that there are 2 massive compounds on Cleveland Place, and the businesses there do have some concerns about the impact it will have on their business. And that's something we have been talking to the businesses about, and we have to watch that very carefully. I think there are limits to what can be done to mitigate that, but it is something that we need to watch. On the plus side, I think we are already seeing less heavy goods vehicle movements. Of course, there are lorries even today breaking the 18-ton limit on Cleveland Bridge. But I think once it is clear that HGVs will not be able to come along that diversion route through the centre of Bath during the period of the works, I expect that to dissipate. And I think my sense, although I've got no figures to back this up, my sense is that at times traffic volumes have been lighter on London Road than they were previously. And that seems to suggest, if that's true, that drivers are choosing to take routes away from Bath or much further out. So those are the kind of main concerns. I mean, for people on the webinar, all of those issues have been raised with council officers and discussed with councillors responsible for this project. So our voice is being heard in terms of these concerns. And now I think it's a question of waiting and watching.
Thank you, Richard. Manda, what about your ward?
Not dissimilar to Richard. My fears are around what happens along Pulteney Road, especially once, and I think you said one of the questioners had mentioned it, especially once you get towards the Widcombe end, because that is so close to a school, that the last thing we want to see is traffic piling up and not switching their engines off and creating a worse situation for air quality than we've got currently. In fact, there are some people on this call who deserve some credit. We have done a lot of monitoring of the bridge during this period while the 18-ton limit has been put on, which started in February, as people may remember, this year. And a lot of people have actually adhered to it, but there have been some fairly obvious transgressors who we're actually now speaking to quite closely to say, you know, the last thing we want, my real fear, is that people think, oh, well, it's all right. They're saying that the bridge is closed, but they've sort of said there's a limit on it and we've managed to sneak across. And they get up to, so from my side of the river, they'd get up to probably Sydney Gardens, and from Richard's side of the river, maybe get as far as the Cleveland turning. And what happens? What happens at that stage? Because it's really quite difficult to understand how we're going to then be able to turn the lorries round. So working with the officers, as Richard has said, a lot of this stuff, we have thought through a lot of it and we've got kind of plans, but we don't quite know exactly what it's going to look like until we see what happens. The amount of signage that we're doing, we're spending an awful lot of money on putting signage all the way out so that people don't have any excuse for getting so close in and then going, I didn't realise that the bridge was shut. So hopefully that's a mitigation for that. To the question about St John's Road, I mean, our anticipation currently is that actually Bathwick Street, Grove Street, St John's Road will be better under these circumstances, because actually the only people who will be going there will be residents, because there is no need at all. You can't actually cut through there to get over the bridge, which is one of the reasons we put in for a livable neighbourhood for it. So I think there will be some people who will see a reduction in traffic. What we have to make sure is the people who see an increase in traffic, we have the right mitigations in, though I would have to say Paul Garrett, when he was here, is completely correct. We don't have, there are some things that we just can't do. We can mitigate as much as we like, but I think we've all got to be open and honest and think this is going to cause a certain amount of congestion. The other thing that maybe I didn't make clear at the beginning, and for which apologies, when we talk about the complete closure of the bridge, I think Mandy mentioned it in her bit, the blue light services will be able to go over and people can still walk and cycle. So, and I absolutely know that not everybody is capable of walking and cycling, you know, any kind of length, but it might be an opportunity for people to think, do you know what, if I'm just going to nip across the bridge to go and visit a friend near Sydney Gardens from Richard's side or the other way, I will try and walk, I will try and cycle, because an ideal outcome of this would be if we cut out some of the really short journeys that people make by car or by van. And they may like it so much that they may stick to it after this is finished. But there are 17,000 vehicle journeys a day over the bridge. Those vehicles are going to go somewhere, and the trick will be making sure that within Bathwick, within Walcott, and actually further out, obviously within Bathhaven South, Bathhaven North, within Lambridge, we do as much as we can to mitigate against what will not be the easiest time.
Manda, remind me, because of course the council has done a lot of modelling also in connection with the clean air zone, and to find, you know, where the worst pollution is, and then sort of see where vehicles are actually going. And there's always a percentage of HGVs, definitely, that are destined for Bath, but then they're the ones that end up in Wiltshire or in other areas around Bath. Do you, on top of your head, actually have a number of a percentage, or Richard, maybe I can ask you as well, you know, what is actually the sort of the balance between the HGVs that actually end up in Bath and those that are just going through Bath and end up in the surrounding areas anyway?
It's a good question, Vera, and we did have some stats pre-pandemic. The issue we've slightly got is that things appear to have changed quite a lot. So as an example, there's now currently 33% more vans going around Bath than there were. And we put that down to the fact that a lot of people have got used to ordering their food online. So although, I mean, as a rough rule of thumb, about 30 to 40% of the traffic going over Cleveland Bridge from Richard's side to our side was going to the university. So that was a within Bath journey. And about 20 or 30% was actually going straight the way through Bath and only using Bath as a cut through. The rest were people who were going to another destination in Bath. But what we don't want to do is just assume that that is going to be what reoccurs as lockdown lifts, because people have changed, things have changed, and some of the big distributors are now having to put lots more lorries on because they need to take it to an Ocado centre or somewhere so all the vans can go and pick it up. So I'm not being slippy-shouldered, but I think it's really quite difficult to say that we've got stats now that we can rely on from 2 years ago.
Yeah, I get that. But again, I think to monitor the situation, it's probably important. I know that the council has got limited resources. We always have to remember that as well. You know, if we had all the resources in the world in our local authorities, then you know, a lot of that work could be done more quickly and more data could be gathered. But with the limited resources that the council has, that maybe some of that data is gathered, which will really help and inform the debate about the future of traffic over the bridge.
I completely agree, and we do have some, as Paul was saying, we have some of the traffic strips that people will have seen on quite a few of the roads, which we've been deploying for the clean air zone, and we totally intend to deploy those when this happens, so that we can also monitor volume of traffic and what kind of traffic and where it's going.
Matt, are there any questions to the councillors?
Well, I'm just going back over some of them. Keris has concluded that we seem to be throwing South Bath under the bus. Everything you've mentioned so far seems to be about protecting North Bath. That's obviously not the intention, but how has this come about?
So I can understand why it looks like that, because it does at the moment. But if we're putting the 7.5 tonne limits on the roads in the north bit of Bath, it does mean that some of them will use the south bits of Bath. It's obviously, being a Bathwick councillor, that is something that I have raised as an issue that I want to monitor, because it wouldn't be right to say that that the south bit of Bath can take all the traffic, because we've got as many roads that have got double vaults underneath and as many narrow roads as some of the other bits. Unfortunately, and Richard's nodding at me, unfortunately, there is the case that people will need to get across Bath or into Bath, and they have to go somewhere. So it's a key thing to me, one of the top things I've asked people to monitor, which is what happens coming down Pulteney Road, what happens going, as I said, across Widcombe, going out in front of the school. Because if that ends up being too poorly impacted, we may have to look at all kinds of things, up to and including opening a bus gate. You know, we have to look at all eventualities if we get too much traffic going down one particular set of streets.
Can I come to the repairs and the weight limit now, Manda? I don't know whether anybody in the chat is asking that as well, but some people are saying that once the repairs are done, the bridge will be strong enough to take 40 tons. Is this the case? I mean, what is the council's position so far on that, or do we need? Well, we probably need the technical expertise, and I said that before. It is a question of judgment. How do you see the situation?
So I wish the officers were still here because I've got all the technical stuff. But this is opinion. The bridge, when it was strengthened in 1997, was strengthened to carry 18 tonne. And if all we're doing is repairing a bridge, you don't necessarily repair a bridge to be able to carry something that's heavier than what it was actually created to do in the first place. Now, having said all that, as long as it's still a primary route network, which it is currently, and I know you're going to work, it's so good to hear that one of the Wiltshire MPs is going to come along and talk to us. And I know Kevin, who's here now, will be talking even more to the Wiltshire councillors, so we'll do all that work. But as long as this is still the primary route network, it will be up to 44 tonne will be what would be allowed to go over the bridge until and unless we can get a permanent weight limit on it. And I need to be really clear, that is absolutely our aim. As far as I'm concerned, we cannot have the 44 tonne lorries going over. And if you look at what happened when the listed building application came to planning, even by our own application, and it makes complete logical sense, the heavier and the more vehicles that go over, the sooner we will be in this position again. So if we don't manage to keep the heavy lorries off, in 10 to 15 years' time, we'll be doing exactly the same thing. We'll be having exactly the same kind of arguments. And that to me makes no sense at all. So a sort of a fair sharing out of traffic going from the M4 down to the south coast, which is what predominantly the through traffic is doing, must be something that's in everyone's interests. So we don't have times when we're pushing all our traffic through Wiltshire or through South Gloucestershire or through wherever because we have to shut the bridge. But on the other hand, we've got, we are protecting our heritage and our air quality here. So sorry, that's a long answer to a short question, but as long as it's a primary route network, there will not be a weight limit imposed on it. Unless the DFT does that, and up till now them and Highways England have said no, which is why we've done all the work we have to say, well, we're going to have to come up with a different solution.
And just very quickly about a legal position. Again, we haven't got any legal advice here in the meeting, but maybe you take that away as well. But what's your sense? Which law takes precedent? The duty to protect the building and also, of course, ultimately public expenditure, because it costs millions to repair that bridge. If this has to happen every 5 or 10 years, I mean, that's taxpayers' money.
Public money, you're right.
So the duty to protect the heritage asset, but also, to be quite honest, to protect the public purse for not having to do the same repairs plus all the disruption again and again, or the Department for Transport's requirement that the bridge should not have a weight limit. Have you had any sort of legal advice on that yet?
We have appointed a barrister who looked into quite a few areas. Richard, do feel free to jump in because I know that you also had conversations with them. There isn't a like everything that's legal, Vera, there isn't a definitive. There is not a definitive, yes, this thing trumps that thing. The thing that does trump everything in the end is, what we can't do is have a bridge that is physically unsafe and put traffic over it where the bridge isn't safe to do it, which is why Mandy Bishop was so keen to make sure that everyone knew the top thing we're trying to do is ensure safety. But this will be part of the negotiations, Vera, that, very pleased that you're on and Kevin's going to be leading on, obviously, from our side, supported by all of us, because you're right. We cannot for lots and lots of reasons, practical, heritage, health and well-being, continue just having the situation as it currently is.
Yes.
Just add to that, Vera. I mean, for me, the issue is not purely about what capacity or weight of lorry that the bridge takes. The reality is that the London Road up to Cleveland Bridge and then across it on the other side from Bathwick right the way through to Widcombe and beyond, the blunt truth of the matter is that the traffic volumes are too high. And the reason, and that there is a problem actually, in the better the road network you provide, the more vehicles that will use it. And the vehicles are what is causing the pollution that is affecting every resident's health all the way through the primary routes in the city. And London Road, where there is a real-time monitoring station, is still well in excess of the national NOx limits for pollution. And that's the reason the clean air zone was introduced, of course. Now, those have improved over the last 18 months to 2 years, so that is encouraging, but they are still illegally high. And I think we must never forget that the people who suffer from this are the residents who live on these roads, and there are thousands of them through the city. And that's actually should be our primary responsibility, is their health and welfare.
I mean, I totally accept, and I don't know whether Michelle is still on this call, that, you know, we have to protect the health and well-being of people, not just in our own patch, but have to have a collective responsibility. So of course, Michelle could also say, look, my people in my villages in Wiltshire also have the same right to clean air. And indeed, this is a much longer and bigger issue around how are we actually creating clean air for all our citizens. And you know, I understand that argument, but it is of course, you know, who then gets the biggest impact of unclean air, and Bath is in this a particular position of being in a bowl. So the clean air sort of sits, the unclean air and the air pollution just sort of sits there. So it is very much about data and impact on our citizens. But the government's position is that we need to find as people in Bath, we need to find an agreement with Wiltshire, and that is absolutely what I think we need to do. And I really want to work constructively with everybody to find a solution rather than having a standoff, which is not good for anybody. Yeah. So I would like now to turn to Council Leader Kevin Guy. Kevin, what's going to happen next?
Thank you, Vera, and good evening, everybody. Apologies, I wasn't at the start of the meeting. My previous meetings overran. Well, so first of all, I'll just like to poo-poo the comments earlier about the Bains are not working with Wiltshire. That's totally not true. Our officers from Bains and Wiltshire have been working very closely. The clean air zone and obviously the Cleveland Bridge deteriorating to a point where it needs to be fixed is a fait accompli on Bains as much as it is a fait accompli to Wiltshire. And on that topic, I had conversations with the Wiltshire leader today and with the Wiltshire Chief Executive today on this very topic. And I was also fortunate enough to talk to Ian, the Liberal Democrat leader of the opposition in Wiltshire as well. And very fruitful conversations came about that. So my job looking ahead, Vera, is, well, let's take a strategic overview point of view as the job of the leader of the council. The problem is it's the north-south traffic. So that is an issue that is shared between ourselves, Wiltshire, South Gloucestershire, Mendip, everywhere. So the long-term solution for that is only in the hands of central government. There's only the government that can fix that problem. And I expressed that to the Wiltshire leader today, and I said I will do everything in my power to move that government work forward. And as was stated earlier, that's the Gateway Transport Initiative. There's also the North-South Connectivity Review, which I think is coming out next year. And I can completely sympathise with Wiltshire councillors and the Wiltshire MPs that HGVs shouldn't be going through the centre of Westbury and Melksham as much as they shouldn't be going through the centre of Bath. So we need to find a joined up solution to the bigger traffic problem. And that's my job, is to help with that bigger strategic picture. And I feel that the MPs' roles are very crucial in this, because the MPs have a far bigger lobbying ability with the transport minister than I think us humble council leaders do. So that's where we are with the legal question that's been raised. All I can do is, and I've said this to the chief executive, that I will do everything in my power and the council's power to try and limit the number of HGVs coming over the Cleveland Bridge moving forward. I don't think it's appropriate that the A36 is a strategic route, and I believe that is shared by the Department of Transport, but they're not taking action as quickly as they can do. So I will ensure that every possible avenue is taken by the Bains Authority to try and prevent HGVs from coming back after the bridge is repaired. Now, I cannot guarantee that any actions that Bains take will not be overruled by the Secretary of State. The power lies with central government and not with myself. but I can only promise as the local council leader to do everything I could possibly do with fellow councillors and ward councillors and yourself, working closely with Wiltshire and MPs to stop HGVs using the A36 as much as possible.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And I think, as I said before, the best way is to work together, including with the Department of Transport, and not use this as a political football, but see this as a joint responsibility for all of us. But that includes, I would always say, and I have said this before, Bath is a World Heritage Site, including actually the countryside around it, the tourists, the people who are coming to Bath itself benefit the outlying areas of Bath as well. You know, I part of our national pride to protect the beautiful old historic structures that we have. That's not just for us in Bath, that is across the country actually. And that pride is not just a local pride, it's a national pride, and Britain has got so many wonderful sites. But no doubt, of course, we understand that residents around Bath have got the right to clean air, and the right to preserve the integrity of their villages and village structures and towns as well, as we have in Bath. And therefore, it is for the Secretary of State to finally ultimately be an arbiter in this, and hopefully really find a solution for north-south traffic, because that's the problem. That is really the most sensible. And I personally would also say the bridge is not the right strategic route for north-south traffic. And I hope that we can come to that conclusion collectively. But as you said, there are studies going out into which lots and lots of experts are going to feed into. And therefore we have to also wait for the outcome of those consultations and studies that are being currently under with the Department of Transport. I'm sure the Weka Mayor will have a say in all of this as well. So there are lots and lots of discussions to be had. Let's have that discussion constructively and not in bad blood. Matt, it's now open for questions and answers from the floor again.
Okay, so I'm just going back to Anthony Clark, who is councillor at Culloden Parish Council. Is Baines committed to pursuing the detrunking of the A3646 route and move to trunking the A350? And if I can just say, as a councillor, so in fact the 36 comes through my ward and the 46 goes through Kevin's ward, so we all have an interest in this. That discussion is what's going to be framed, and that's Baroness Beer's preferred route, is to have all that discussed through the Western Gateway Transport Board, and to have all those discussions around that. But I would be prepared to say, no, let's not detrunk the 3646. Let's trunk the A350 because it's had lots of money dueling it anyway. But you know, let's talk about what's the fair share. As Vera said, we've all got this north-south traffic we've got to think about. What's the fair share for each of us to take? And I think those are the discussions and negotiations that would take place, which follows into Philip's question, which I think we'd possibly address. But in the petition, you say you plan to move the HGVs onto the A350. At present, this road passes through the small villages and towns as Melksham. Will you be looking to continue to close the bridge and enact the plan before bypasses and alternative roads are built? And again, I think that that negotiation is to happen through the Western Gateway Transport Board. But does anybody want to comment on any of that?
I mean, the issue around any sort of new roads and road building is, I've got a particular view on it. As somebody who also is an environmental campaigner, we ultimately have to find ways where we don't continuously build roads, because as soon as you build a road, you fill it with cars. So introducing and working as hard as possible to alternatives, not even HGVs, one thing, but also to private car travel, for me continues to be an ambition. And of course, there have to be meaningful alternatives, but we cannot continue to increase road traffic and then just build the roads and then have the road traffic. We need to find ways of good, meaningful alternatives. And that is ultimately, again, a responsibility for a national government to make the resources available to bring that transport revolution about. And councils on their own cannot do that, particularly if they are as cash-strapped as they currently are. So the alternatives and the will to really solve our massive traffic, air pollution, congestion, CO2, NOx pollution, and so on and so forth, net zero ambitions. Ultimately, we need a government that really puts its mind to that and helps local authorities, whether that's Wiltshire, whether that's Gloucestershire, whether that's Bath, to find ways through that.
Did anybody else want to comment? No. Just moving on, Graham offers some feedback from the A350. The house now shakes all day and all night. Bart Tap is asking, what are the sat-navs going to do in terms of routing people through Bath? Are you ensuring that they do not send people in the direction of Cleveland Bridge? Amanda, I think we've notified them, but we have no influence over the routes they offer.
So yes, you're right, Matt, and some of the new ones do push updates. The problem we've got is, although all of them know where to direct the traffic, if you've got an older model and you don't download the new updates, it won't be telling you anything other than go over Cleveland Bridge. So that's why we've done a four-pronged thing, in that we've spoken to all the hauliers and the big freight companies. We've spent an awful lot on static signage. We're spending money on moving signage both on the M4 and down as far as Warminster, and doing radio adverts about to tell people what's going on, plus talk to the sat-navs. So we really are doing the absolute best we can to make sure that no one can say, you know, I didn't know. And they've, you know, they will have, at that stage, they'll have to have driven past 14 signs as a minimum.
Can I just add one thing? I mean, not having deviation signage is just the worst, because when people, and the officer said that, then people find their own way and make the whole issue even more problematic. So again, the cooperation and working together on this issue is in everybody's interest, because nothing is worse than when just the traffic dispersal becomes chaotic and everybody does their own thing. So following the advice and having clear signage agreed, and taking people particular routes rather than people finding their own ways through back streets is not really the right solution.
Completely agree.
Would anybody like to address the link road? That's been raised by Philip and possibly Peter.
Well, I'll have a go. I'll have a go. The history of this is that this was proposed in 1991, I think, and ruled out of the scheme that dualled the A46, because there was a link planned across the river, across the railway and the canal at that point. And of course, as time turned out, there was opposition to that, and it was dropped. Probably there are a number of issues with this. And again, I think it goes back to what Kevin has said about the North-South connectivity study. When the Treasury finally come to look at the proposals that come out of that, they will apply Green Book measures, that's Treasury Green Book value for money measures, as to whether schemes represent good value for money for the public purse. And I think the last information I heard on the North-South link was that it was highly unlikely to do that. So I have no idea what the current cost of a viaduct, because that's effectively what it would have to be across the valley, aside from the environmental impacts of that. But it looks like it would be hundreds of millions of pounds, which one gets the sense that would not meet the Treasury Green Book investment requirements. And in part, that's probably because the A36 south of Bath is fundamentally not a very good road for high volumes of vehicles. So I know lots of people regularly raise this. They also raise the issue of a tunnel underneath the river, the railway and the canal. And if you think the viaduct is expensive, tunneling underneath will be even more expensive. And I think you have to bear in mind that when you are building a tunnel, it has to have a very gradual entry into the tunnel and out of it. And the land on the south side is at a considerable height difference to the valley floor. And that's true on both sides. So in engineering terms, yes, of course, one can do anything, but I think this is probably not a realistic aspiration, but we'll have to wait and see how the experts evaluating the north-south connectivity study, how they assess that in the relation to other options. And it wouldn't be a surprise to anybody on this call to know that the Treasury is highly unlikely to pick the most expensive option. The Treasury will pick the cheapest, best value for money option, and then they will look at the other impacts that come from that. So I don't think I would want to raise anybody's hopes that this is a quick solution. The final thing I just want to say on that, Matt, is that for that type of scheme, you have to get into the Treasury, into the Department for Transport 5-year investment plan. And there are 2 stages to that. The first stage is you have to get into the preliminary list, and that's usually a list of maybe 20, 30 schemes. Those then get evaluated in detail before they make it into the actual building plan. So it takes a minimum of 10 years to get through that process. Well, some of us may not be here in 10 years. So, I just don't think it's a realistic option, and a much better option is to take measures to try and reduce traffic volumes and take other mitigations as we've been discussing tonight. So, I'm not totally pouring cold water on it, but let's wait and see what the study says.
Okay. Another one from Keris. If we're not going to use this as a political football, can Wiltshire be asked to withdraw their unjustifiable decision to deny permission to use the A350 as a diversionary route for traffic whilst the bridge is closed? Their decision is likely to risk making the work take longer. Manda, is that well, Kevin? You've spoken to them today, haven't you? So.
I mean, yes, so Kevin, I've not managed to catch up with Kevin since he's spoken to them today, so he may have slightly more up-to-date information than I have, but if you haven't, Kevin, I'm happy to give it a go as well.
Yeah, so I did raise this issue with the leader of Wiltshire Council today, and obviously this issue was a political football because of the recent elections in Wiltshire, and I understand that, and I said, can we have a clean slate moving forward? Because we all know sat-navs will naturally take people along the A350. They won't take people through the route that we've managed to negotiate with South Gloucestershire, because they'll just, HGVs and people will just go the quickest way the sat-nav tells them to go. So I think it's really important that the people of Wiltshire and Wiltshire Council accept that Baines will work with them very closely to get proper diversions through Wiltshire. Today, I didn't have a commitment from the leader of Wiltshire Council, but I will ask officers to press that again, because it's very unfair for the residents of Wiltshire to have this excess traffic without the appropriate signage, because unknown vehicles can get lost in towns like Westbury and Melksham, and that's not fair on them. So Wiltshire Council really need to accept the reality of the situation, that good heavy goods vehicles will be coming through their area, and we're happy to help in any way that we can.
Thank you. Sorry, so Gordon's saying, because he's not long joined, have you taken into account the effect this proposal will have on Western Wiltshire? I say yes, Gordon. That's pretty much half of everything we've been talking about this evening. Rachel says, I understood that the complete bridge closure would be 3 months. Richard Samuels mentioned 6 months in this discussion. Is it 3 or is it 6?
May I take that one?
Yeah.
So as I said at the beginning, we currently planned it to be for 3 months. The 6 month may be the overall work schedule. So there was time at the beginning to put the scaffolding up, then the actual closure would be 3 months, and then time taken to take the scaffolding down at the end, equated to about 6 months. But please, I know I'm going to be a bit of a broken record on this, please can I ask people to keep looking at the website, because that is exactly what we planned to do. But you know, even now we've still got scaffolding still going up in some of the areas, and we don't know what we're going to see. So the 6 months is the complete project. The 3 months was the actual closure.
A minimum of 3 months. Let's be realistic.
I think that's probably a fair way of putting it, Vera. Thank you.
Gordon's saying, Wiltshire Council believe that the top criteria is not necessarily cost, it is the shortening of journey times. Is that in? I'm not sure what you're referring to there, Gordon. If you want to jump in and.
I think a lot of the way sort of government spending decisions are being made is not just the engineering cost, but what cost or advantage something would have to the economy. And I know that you know, the Department for Transport, but also highways officers and councils often calculated, you know, that let's say if 10,000 people take 5 minutes less to get to work, that has got a benefit and a positive cost to the economy overall. So there's always a sort of cost benefit calculation. Can I say one thing? The one thing that might actually change the whole way we are looking and thinking about costs and traffic is, of course, the pandemic. I mean, so many businesses are now considering whether people have to come back on a weekly, daily basis into their offices, or whether people can actually start doing lots more of a sort of mixture between office work and home work. And who knows, that there might actually be a positive outcome, certainly when it comes to traffic and congestion, long term definitely, around that not everybody has to rush to the office at a rush hour at the same time. Currently, the things that are a little bit you know, worrying is because of the pandemic, people are not daring to use public transport, and it has actually increased in some traffic on the road. But long term, I like to be positive. There might be ways and reasons to think that actually that the individual car journeys over a long period of time might change, because we all start behaving differently when it comes to our work routines.
Okay, and I just wanted to say, so Johnny Kidney has pointed out that I misrepresented his comments, and that there is actually a route avoiding the weight limit through Bradford-on-Avon. So Johnny, if I could ask you to email cleveland_bridge at bathnest.gov.uk with your point. Manda, can I ask you to take that forward and get a response for Johnny from officers? Yep. Thank you. Does anybody know what Dan Norris, the new Wera mayor, is doing about the issue?
Well, I had a very constructive first meeting with Dan Norris last week. So I'm sure he will be part of the discussion as well. I think I've allowed him to put his feet under the table. He's got lots on his desk, but definitely I think engaging very closely with the new Wera mayor is one of our first duties as MPs, but also as councillors in the council in Bath, and that will definitely happen. Matt, we are coming sort of soon to the end of our session. I don't know how many more questions you have there.
No, that's it. I think a summary of where we are and who's invited to do what next would be good.
Again, I think it's been an interesting evening to have some of the arguments on the table. If there was, I always say that, if there was an easy solution to this, you know, it would already be done. So I think everybody recognizes the difficulties and the need to work together in order to have, as Matt also put it, and Richard and Manda, we all recognize the problem, and we can't just sort of close our eyes and think that the other side of the story doesn't exist. Of course it does, and the better we work together and recognize each other's interests and work our way through it, the more positive the overall outcome will be. I've been long enough in politics to know that one can't satisfy absolutely everybody. That would be lovely. That's my absolute dream. But politics tells me that in the end, there will always be as small as possible a group of people who continue to be dissatisfied. Sometimes, actually, I also find in politics you just have to do something and show people that that's the right way forward, and people will gradually come on board. My invitation to the World and Peace is absolutely there. As I said, I've written the invitation, and if Michelle is still on the call, I recognize as a minister she has got loads and loads of things to do. But let's get that meeting done as quickly as possible, so we have a way forward. I know that Kevin will continue to speak to his opposites in the other councils around Bath. It is our ambition as people in Bath and representatives for Bath is pretty clear. We simply believe that Cleveland Bridge itself is not a suitable strategic route for heavy lorry vehicles. But we also recognize that we have to have responsibility for the traffic that goes happens in and around Bath. Absolutely no doubt about it. It is ultimately the Department for Transport who has to come forward with its strategic route, and then also make the resources available to build that out. And as Richard has already put out about a link road, governments of all shapes and sizes and forms and colors will ultimately make a value for money discussion in which everything is included, and the benefits and the disadvantages, and those are pretty brutal discussions in the end. And the government, the more it engages with local councils on this issue, is probably also a wise thing to do. In the meantime, we in Bath engage with people in Bath, and of course also the people around us in Wiltshire and Gloucestershire. I want to thank everybody again for coming on this call. This is not the end of the discussion, I'm sure, and we'll continue to talk. So thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to Manda, Richard, Kevin, to be available for answering questions. Please pass on again our thanks to Mandy and Paul. And I wish everybody on this call a very good evening, and hopefully the sun is going to shine again over the weekend. That's my hope. All right then.